All right, fantastic. Again, another round of applause for George, and thank you to you for participating. These moments, these conversations, they're extremely important, and I hope they trigger some questions and thoughts and potential collaborations and ideas about also just learning who's around you and what kind of perspective. I keep answering the questions to the media this week. They ask me like, is this a conference that's promoting sex robots? Like, do you all kind of like all want people to have sex with robots? I'm like, this is a very intense misunderstanding of what a conference is, and kind of like the breadth and variety of the diverse perspective that people have within this community. So thank you for sharing your thoughts, sharing your perspective. I think this is what makes it also quite beautiful. And we are going to continue by welcoming once again Madison Williams, who will be presenting on behalf of Dr. Eliane Dussault on a talk called What Drives Teledildonic Use. And it is a project that has been done in collaboration with Kiru, our sponsor. So welcome, Madison Williams.
Hi, I'm back. Today I'll be presenting this research. The work was led by my colleague, Dr. Eliane Dussault, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. So I'll be presenting on her behalf. And the project was also supervised by Dr. David Lafortune. Sex toys are becoming increasingly commonplace in people's solo and partnered sexual activities. Studies focusing on traditional sex toy use, including the use of analog vibrators, dildos, strokers, have reported that it's prevalent, with usage rates varying from 16 to 66% of men, and from 24 to 73% of women, and 76% of trans and non-binary individuals. These varying prevalences represent different contexts and populations, with some studies focusing on sex toy use in community samples of college students, and others focusing on gay and bisexual women and men. Although research remains scarce, users of traditional sex toys tend to be women, with lesbian and bisexual women being especially likely to engage in both partnered and solo use. The most common reasons that people report using sex toys is to spice things up with a sexual partner, to please their partner, and to improve sexual arousal. The current project will focus specifically on teledildonics, which I'll explain in a second, and there's some evidence to suggest that users of teledildonics differ from users of traditional sex toys. For those who don't know, teledildonics are novel devices that are designed to enhance sexual experiences by mimicking elements of real human intimacy without a partner being physically present. They can mimic sensations like genital touch, body warmth, and they can be synchronized with porn, and they can even mimic orgasm. They can also be integrated with virtual reality, and they can be controlled remotely by a partner who isn't physically present with you, which allows for intimacy at a distance. One study reported that 9% of Americans had used teledildonics, and that those users tended to be men, South Asian, and to identify as gay or bisexual. They're also slightly younger, they had a slightly higher income, and they identified as more religious than those who had not used teledildonics. Connected sex toys have been theorized to offer benefits to men who use them. There is a lack of empirical evidence to support these claims. During solo masturbation, teledildonics can unlock access to sexual sensations that mimic realistic sexual interactions. They can promote sexual satisfaction when one doesn't have access to a sexual partner, and they may facilitate sexual exploration of one's own body. The ability to customize these tools, like changing the pressure, the speed, and the motion range, can also be helpful to those who may have mobility difficulties or other physical disabilities. When used with a partner, teledildonics could help men to better control their own sexual response cycle, enabling their partners to experience greater sexual satisfaction. And finally, they make it possible to connect sexually with a long-distance partner, which of course is not possible without them. With this current study, we aim to fill a gap in the literature and to capitalize on the rapid emergence of teledildonics by conducting one of the first empirical explorations of connected sex toy use in the context in which such use is related to greater sexual well-being. And specifically, our objectives were to document the demographic characteristics and the levels of sexual well-being of individuals using connected sex toys. We aim to document the habits, like the frequency of use and how they use it with lubrication and pornography, and the motivations associated with teledildonic use. We aim to compare solo and partnered sex toy use on sociodemographic characteristics, habits, and sexual well-being variables like sexual functioning, novelty, pleasure, satisfaction, self-esteem, and embodiment. And finally, we aim to determine the factors that were associated with partnered teledildonics use. To examine these objectives, we recruited a sample of 617 cisgender men who were customers of Kiru, a Dutch-based teledildonics company that offers sex toys that provide hands-free masturbation, the ability to connect remotely with a long-distance partner, and the use of AI to pair the experience with virtual reality or porn. We recruited via their customer listserv and social media forums between May and June of 2024. To be included in the final sample, participants had to be at least 19 years old. They had to have used a Kiru sex toy within the previous 3 months, and they needed to read and understand English and have completed at least 70% of the survey to ensure quality data. The survey was hosted on Qualtrics, and it took around 10 to 15 minutes to complete. Our participants first completed a homemade socio-demographic questionnaire. They answered questions about their sex toy use, the motivations to use, and reasons to purchase connected sex toys. That inventory of motivations to use connected sex toys was informed by literature on the reasons to masturbate, since there isn't really anything on sex toys yet, but it was adapted to include specific features of teledildonics. We also administered the Arizona Sexual Experience Scale, which is a measure of sexual functioning, including aspects of sex drive, arousal, penile erection, ability to reach orgasm, and satisfaction with sex. Finally, we administered the Sexuality Scale, which is a measure of sexual self-esteem, or how a person feels about themselves as a sexual being, including their confidence in their sexual attractiveness, their ability to engage in sexual activities, and their overall comfort with sexuality. To analyze our results, we employed binomial multivariate logistic regression and used descriptive statistics. These are the descriptive statistics of our sample. The mean age of our participants was around 35, with a standard deviation of around 10. And most of our sample resided in North America, and most of the rest resided in Europe. Our sample's mean annual income was quite high, over 77,000, with a large standard deviation of about 95,000. This number is converted to USD from whatever currency the participants reported in. Our sample was also predominantly white, with substantial proportions of Asian, Latin American, and Black participants. Slightly more than half of our participants were in a relationship, and the average duration of those relationships was about 12 years, so pretty long. And finally, our sample had about 13 sexual partners on average in their lifetime, with a large standard deviation of 53. We found that 78.9% of our participants reported using Kiru teledildonics only on their own, while about 1.3% reported only using them with a partner. 19.8% reported using their sex toys in both contexts. In other words, most participants used their toys in solo contexts, and a few others also incorporated them into partnered sex. Here we have the most common motivations for using sex toys, with the percentages representing the proportion of participants who endorsed each motivation. Using teledildonics to relax or to release tension was the most common motivation, endorsed by 57% of the sample. The next most common motivation were to fantasize about sexual activities that are not possible in real life. For example, having sex with an adult film star, and to improve their sexual arousal during masturbation, both of which were endorsed by about half of the sample. 44% of participants reported that they had used teledildonics to keep themselves sexually satisfied in the absence of a sexual partner, and 42% reported using them to keep themselves satisfied when a sexual partner was unavailable. Finally, 38% reported that they used teledildonics specifically for the opportunities to integrate their devices with other technologies like virtual reality or pornography. Now for the binomial regression results. We found that men who used their teledildonics with a partner were 3.82 times more likely to be in a relationship than those who only used their toys alone. They were also more likely to own a higher number of devices, to report a higher number of past sexual partners, and to consume pornography when using their sex toys. They were also more likely to report higher sexual desire, higher sexual self-esteem, and ability to orgasm when having sex with a partner. This study was the first to empirically examine teledildonics use in a community sample of men, and the first to find that it has links with higher sexual well-being. Our descriptive data highlighted that our participants came from diverse backgrounds in terms of ethnicity, annual income, and country of residence, with some overrepresentations of privileged characteristics, like being white, having a high mean annual income. This might underline that while teledildonics can help enable more accessible sexual activities for some individuals, like those without access to a sexual partner, these tools are still quite expensive and restricted to people with a higher socioeconomic status. There was also a large number of Asian men in the sample, even though very few of them resided in Asia. And usually Asian men are underrepresented in sex studies. But another study comparing the engagement with forms of sex tech found that participants in the United States who identified as Asian used teledildonics more frequently than the rest of the sample. So it's possible that this was why our study was particularly applicable to this group. Motivations to use teledildonics in our sample were partly in line with previous research documenting that common motivations to masturbate or use traditional analog sex toys included to improve the sexual response, like sexual arousal and the ability to orgasm, or for relaxation and stress reduction purposes. Since a substantial proportion of our sample reported being virgins or never using teledildonics with a partner, partner-oriented motivations to use teledildonics were less frequent compared to what was documented in previous research. We were also able to find that some common motivations for using connected sex toys, like fantasizing about sexual activities that aren't possible in real life, or a desire to integrate toy usage with other technologies, and these had not been previously explored in other research. People who used their teledildonics with a partner were unsurprisingly more likely to be in a relationship, but a substantial number of individuals in a relationship used their toys only by themselves. A similar proportion of single individuals used their toys with casual sexual partners. This highlights that it's really the use of sex toys with a partner, casual or committed, not the relationship itself, that's related to higher sexual well-being. This research is, of course, not without limitations. Specifically, our use of a cross-sectional design, convenient sampling, and self-reported measures may reduce the generalizability of our results. We also asked specifically about participants' Kiru sex toy use. And while this was super valuable in understanding this particular company's users, our study design may have masked the use of other toys. So a person who rarely uses their Kiru sex toy could have simply preferred another brand and used them more often. This limitation could have been mitigated by assessing teledildonics use regardless of the country that fabricated them. In light of these limitations, future work should aim to replicate this research with more sexually and gender diverse samples. Our analysis also indicated that there might be some different profiles of teledildonics users, but our analytic strategy didn't allow us to verify this. Future studies using person-centered analyses on the motivations to use teledildonics and using comparative analyses to distinguish participants based on their demographics and sexual well-being levels are necessary to improve the understanding of teledildonics users. Overall, this study emphasizes the multifaceted role of sex toys in enhancing sexual experiences and their potential to contribute positively to sexual health and well-being in a sample of cisgender men. Understanding these factors and how they're associated with partnered use can guide initiatives aimed at enhancing sexual satisfaction and well-being, including the integration of teledildonics as sexual aids in therapeutic settings for those who may be experiencing sexual difficulties. And I'm excited to share that this research has been published in the Journal of Sex Research. I do think this QR code is also not working. So if anybody wants access to this, please come see me afterwards and I can happily share that with you. And we also have a piece that's been translated for a general audience available in the conversation. Also probably not working, but come see me. Yeah, so on that note, I would like to thank Kiru and the Shaw for sponsoring this research. And without them, this study wouldn't have ever happened, and we're really glad that it did. So if anyone has any questions, my contact info is here, and I can also put you in touch with Eliane if you would like to talk to her. Thank you.
Right. Do we have questions for Madison?
Thank you. You might not have reported, but I maybe they didn't collect it, but did they get information about patients' medications, health conditions? Because in my clinical experience, many of the people using devices are disabled, or recovered from prostate surgery. So were those factors listed in the study?
We did ask, I believe, if they experienced any disabilities, but we didn't get specific details on medications and stuff. If you're interested, I can find the data for you. I don't have it on hand, but we did ask, yeah.
One more questions? One time? Two times?
If your research is interested, I can put you in touch with someone who's doing a study about whether regular use of this, almost as an exercise tool, can increase penile blood flow after prostate surgery.
Yeah.
So
Please, I would love that. Thanks.
Yes, let's collaborate. Okay, well, a round of applause for Madison. And up next, we will have two rapid talks, one by starting with Felipe Amado, a medical student from the University of Sherbrooke, presenting on a very interesting topic, the ethical issues of childlike sex dolls. So a round of applause for Felipe.
So hi everyone, my name is Felipe. It's my first time at LSR, so I'm really nervous. But thank you for having me. So okay, I'll just start. So I was reading Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, which is a book that talks about the point of view of a pedophile. And so this pedophile is like a 30-something male who is obsessed over this girl who's like 12 years old. And that led me to like kind of spiral into this, I don't know, into my thoughts. And I was like, could we treat these people like with these urges and impulses with dolls? So that's why I'm here to talk about the ethical issues of childlike sex dolls and the potential for AI-based exposure therapy. I will talk very fast because it is a pretty long presentation, so I'm sorry if I talked too fast. So very quickly, I just want to talk a little bit more about childlike sex dolls, which I will call CSBs. So you know, there are dolls who range from toddlers to young adults. And with the increase in AI technologies, they are now able to talk, they have eye movement, they can now, some of them give consent. So those are all ethical issues I will talk about later. But that are very important, to me, they're very worrying. So they're always almost sold under a different name. So for example, petite doll or like young looking doll. And they're mainly sold in Japan and China because it is legal over there. So also most of these dolls have larger and unrealistic openings. For example, their mouths are bigger, their vaginas are bigger, which kind of lets users believe that children and can have sex, well, like are made to have sex and should have sex, which is also very um to me like kind of ew. Anyways, so I'll just skip that. So very quickly about the legal variability. So in the United States, there are no federal bans. Some states are restricting it. In Canada, it's very much illegal. It is considered child pornography. And in Japan and China, it is legal. So that's why most of the dolls are sold over there and imported from over there. And just so we're all on the same page, I want to talk a little bit about the criteria for pedophilia. So first of all, sexual arousal to prepubescent children. It has to last for at least 6 months. The individuals have to be at least 16 years old and 5 years older than the child involved. And it has to cause a clinical distress, or the person has to have acted upon these urges. Very quickly also about the treatments of pedophilia. So usually they go for cognitive behavioral therapy, which is, sitting down with a therapist, the therapist telling them how harmful their actions are and why their like impulses are kind of like bad and what impacts would it have on real children. Then there's chemical castration, so using hormones to kind of block testosterone production, which leads to lower levels of sexual impulses. There's also one that's called physical castration, so they basically remove both testicles. So that's pretty like ethically like you know what I mean. Yes. And very quickly also about AI-based exposure therapy. So exposure therapy is usually used with people who have social anxiety, who have post-traumatic stress disorder or obsessive compulsive disorder. So basically it is a way to expose people to their distressing stimuli to reduce emotional reactivity. So I was thinking about what about using AI-based, child pornography or children to kind of treat these people with pedophilia. So I'm gonna leave you with this quote that made me think a lot. So it's by Tagaki Shin, the founder of Trotla. So it's a company who produces childlike sex dolls. And it's, I am helping people express their desires legally and ethically. I often receive letters from buyers. The letters say, thank you for your dolls. I can keep, like, thanks to your dolls, I can keep from committing a crime. So just very quickly with the methodology, I did a narrative literature review and using also gray literature and opinion pieces. And also with the help of Georges and Kathleen, we kind of did like an ethical analysis together. So some of the benefits of using CSBs. So first of all, barriers to access and stigma. So there was a German survey that demonstrated that more than 95% of the responding psychotherapists were unwilling to work with patients diagnosed with pedophilia for various reasons. But one of those reasons was, having negative feelings and attitudes towards this patient group. So, and, a large number of people with pedophilia, were scared to be stigmatized and felt stigmatized by, medical professionals like therapists and such. So I was thinking about, maybe using these dolls could, help people come forward and like, people would come forward more and seek for help more because they would feel less judged. Then there's the harm reduction argument. So, these people have these urges and these fantasies. And is it is it really possible to extract these fantasies from them? Like, are they ever going to be able to not have these urges and impulses? So with that being said, there are studies showing data suggesting that CSB owners reported a greater reduction in compulsive sexual behavior and consumed less child pornography since they owned a doll. And very interestingly, in Czech Republic in 1989, They legalized all kinds of pornography, so even child pornography, and there was a drop in rape and child sexual abuse. So there's also the Arcana hypothesis that robots, like stipulates that robots designed to look and act like children could be used to treat pedophiles the way methadone is used to treat drug addicts. So instead of trying so hard to like remove all these impulses, why not just give them another way to, you know, act out on their impulses without harming real children? Oh my God, okay. I have like 2 minutes left. I'll just keep going. So the learning theory in psychology. So, you know, all the treatments for pedophiles right now are all punitive. So it's like, but however, like using the reinforcement theory, you know, a behavior that leads to a positive outcome that satisfies you will be likely to be repeated. So instead of like always telling them that it's wrong, we could maybe give them an outlet to, you know, have a positive outcome and satisfy themselves, and maybe they wouldn't use real children to do so. And some of the risks now. So from a feminist standpoint, you know, like sex dolls, like sex dolls objectify women, while childlike sex dolls objectify children. So, you know, they kind of like makes children seem like an object of sexual pleasure. Also with the growing technology, you know, some childlike sex dolls could be able to give consent, which is kind of which would which is like dangerous because maybe pedophiles would view children as beings who can give consent and maybe act out their impulses on real children. And then there's maybe pedophiles would become desensitized. So some CSVs have, you know, pre-recorded programmed voices telling the user how much they're enjoying the act, how good it feels. And also some CSVs, as I said earlier, can have orgasms. But also, you know, even childlike sex dolls who don't have a voice can be harmful because they don't offer cues of resistance. So some pedophiles could, you know, see that as consent. So a lot of psychiatrists are concerned right now that it may solidify the misconception that children like and desire sexual relations. And lastly, you know, offensiveness, it's just gross in my opinion. And I know it's like not a strong argument, but I feel like in a society, it would kind of be a strong argument. And you know, just because it's less bad than, you know, having sex with a real child does not mean that it's good. Some very quickly, some recommendations. So with my colleagues, we thought about implementing controlled and ethical pilot programs because there aren't a lot of studies right now. Studies about the use of, you know, the therapeutic use of these dolls, treating pedophilia. So maybe, you know, investing in that, but also developing context-sensitive legal frameworks. So some societies, like some countries could decide to, you know, allow these dolls to be used in a controlled environment, such as a hospital, or some could just allow them to be used at home, but with like a follow-up with like a psychiatrist or a therapist. And lastly, you know, establishing legal and safeguards against misuse and abuse. Yeah. And some of the limits, so it's very hard to verify the scale of impact. And you know, it's just a very hard population to recruit and follow because it's like they have so much stigma around them. So I feel like a lot of, you know, people with pedophilia would not be the first to come forward to participate in this kind of studies. Thank you for listening.
Do we have any questions?
Yes, there was one over there.
You talked about the limitations of studies on this population, but do you have any planned?
Like
Any studies planned? Like basically, I'm curious what your next step is with the research that you've done.
Honestly, I would love to continue this and like actually do a research, but maybe in the near future, but I don't think I will do it. But I would love to, but um, no, I don't have any plans of following this research.
Thank you. It was really fascinating. There is a team, I think, at UCAM or in Université in OAT that is working on like virtual reality and like harm reduction. And maybe that's people you could contact.
Oh,
You know, if
yes.
you wanted to continue it, because you have the material aspect and they have the virtual one, and they're basically doing the same thing.
Oh,
So,
thank you. That would be
yeah.
great.
Yeah, I
Thank-
would look for it and give it to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's team at Pinel, there's Michael Cito, there's Patrice Renaud here, and there's teams at UCAM also that are studying these questions.
Oh, cool.
I have a few questions because you know, pedophilia gets a lot of buzz in the news because it's so lurid. But what is the real incidence of pedophilia? We want first question, and also what's the age of these dolls? These baby dolls? Are they teenage dolls? I mean, you know, and the last question is, how can you possibly criminalize sex with a doll? What's the rationalization for that?
So for your second question, which was like so there are many, honestly, all kinds of dolls. Some of them they just have like very, childlike features. Like they're very, tiny. But there are toddler dolls, but there are also like, teenager dolls. So they vary a lot. I didn't quite get your first question, sorry. I think I'd have to like double check, but I feel like almost 5%, I believe I checked. But like, not a lot of people come forward. So it's kind of like, and there's a difference between, having like pedophilia, you have to have acted upon these urges, or it has to cause a significant distress. But you can have just, kind of like pedophilic desires, which you did not act upon them. So it's like different. And your third question, sorry. Like, that's a good question.
We might have some people also in the audience that might have the answer. I think there's here in Canada, it's the representation of minors. The laws related to porn and representation of minors that has been extended to the dolls. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have more questions, we have criminologists and legal scholars in the room then. All right, a round of applause. And up next will be Kathleen Nguyen, medical student also from the University of Montreal, who will discuss compagnons artificiels et construction de l'identité chez les personnes vulnérables. Yeah. There you go.
So hello everyone. I'm Catlin. I am a medical student at the Université de Montréal. So this conference is a little bit different from others that I've attended, but I am so honored to be here. And so I'd like to thank the organizing committee for having me today. And thank you to you guys for being here. So today I'm going to be discussing artificial companions and identity construction in vulnerable populations. So imagine having a friend who never judges you, who remembers every single detail you've ever shared, and who's always there, day or night. Well, for many, there is this friend that exists, and it's not necessarily, well, it's not human. They're actually AI companions like Replica.
So over the last few months, I've explored how these AI friends affect people who are psychologically vulnerable. So individuals living with chronic isolation, anxiety, or other mental health challenges. Today, I want to share with you guys what the research tells us, how these relationships are a lifeline, a mirror to self-discovery to some, but also a source of dependency, a loss of social skills, and ethical concern. But first, what are AI companions? Well, AI companions such as Replica use relational AI, combining natural language processing, emotional analysis, and memory. So they can hold conversations that feel personal and effective. They adapt to your personality, they joke with you, they remember your pet's name, they even open up about themselves. They're also available on your phone or your computer 24/7. So, always available, always responsive. For most people, they're a curiosity, but for vulnerable users, they can become a stable, non-judgmental space to explore identity without fear of rejection. So why do some people, especially vulnerable ones, connect so deeply with AI companions? Well, think about it this way. If you have very few stable and supportive relationships in your life, an AI can become a refuge, a sort of safe space where you can feel heard and accepted. So attachment theory can help us explain this. In close relationships, we look for three things. The first one is proximity maintenance, which means that, you feel like that person is always there for you. Then you have safe haven, so you get comfort and reassurance in tough times. And then there's secure base, so you have the confidence to be yourself and try new things. AI companions can tick all of these boxes. And for some, especially in times of crisis and isolation, for example, during the pandemic, they can feel like a friend or a partner, a therapist, or even family. So if we look at the benefits are real and significant. First, we have identity exploration. In an article I read from Kuros and Papa, they call AI companions digital mirrors. That means that they let people express sides of themselves that they might never show in usual human-to-human relationships. And so that can reinforce self-coherence and confidence. Then there's also social rehearsal. So AI companions give people the space to practice and to experiment conversation, empathy, and emotional control, all in a safe setting. Third is accessibility. So, think about it. No time zones, no travel. So support is literally always there, right at your fingertips. And then there's consistency. So AI companions, they provide steady empathy and attention all the time. So, that's something that humans can't always promise. Some users even say that using an AI companion has improved their offline relationships, self-care, and reflection. There's another piece here that I think is crucial. So what people like isn't just that AI feels human. It's that for some, they can feel more human than the people in their lives. So if you never had someone really listen or remember details and respond with warmth, AI can feel really amazing. But here's the risk. When an AI meets those needs so well, it can replace the idea of looking for human connection altogether. It's safe, it's curated, but it's also missing the unpredictability and the growth that human-to-human connections also can bring. So why do these bonds form? So these bonds, they form through psychological processes. The first one being the CASA effect. So CASA is computers as social actors, which is when we instinctively treat computers socially, even though we know that they're not human. Then there's the personality match. So when the AI style feels very similar to yours or very familiar, then trust then grows. There are three other key factors that help strengthen a bond. The first one being reciprocal self-disclosure. And this is when the AI shares back. And so the relationship and the exchanges feel mutual. The second one is perceived humanity. So, it has human-like cues that feel real, but not creepy as to fall into the uncanny valley. And then the third one is social presence, which is when you just feel like someone is there with you. And then there are also risks, and these risks are just as real. The first one is emotional dependence. So some users feel real grief and a real sense of loss when the AI is taken away, or if there's updates made and if the AI is shut down. Others prioritize the AI's needs over their own in their own lives. There's also a loss of social skills because AI offers comfort without the messiness of human relationships. So real life connections can feel harder. Then we have safety concerns. So it has been reported that some AI companions have encouraged harmful behaviors such as self-harm or suicide in an attempt to be relatable with the user. And there are also the privacy issues surrounding these conversations that are often deeply personal. There's also the commodification of care. And this one's simple. These are products, and there are companies behind them that are trying to make profit. Thus, many human-like features are locked behind paywalls, and this can limit access to care and create inequality. And then the last one is identity impact. So simulated reciprocity can be mistaken for real mutuality. And this reinforces unhealthy self-images or expectations. So why does this matter? This matters because vulnerable people are the ones who are most likely to reap the biggest benefits, but also suffer the deepest harms. These aren't just apps. They can shape identity, mental health, and how someone relates to others long term. They are powerful relational technologies, and we need to treat them that way. So, where do we go from here? We can apply the ethics of care. So, design AI companions to complement, not replace, human connection. That means we need transparency. Users deserve to know how the AI works or manipulate, or how the AI works and what it does with their data. So no hidden algorithms and no vague promises. Then we need safeguards. Systems, they must be able to filter out harmful or manipulative content so they don't worsen crises like self-harm or abuse, kind of like in Timagard. Then we need to be careful with all the privacy issues. These conversations, they often contain very deep personal details, and protecting that information should be the default. It's a given. It should not be an add-on. We also need clinical oversight. So for high-risk groups, like people struggling with severe loneliness or mental health issues, AI use should be paired with some level of human supervision or referral pathways. And we can also build hybrid models. So instead of AI replacing care, imagine AI integrated into therapy, counseling, or community health, acting as a bridge between moments of human support. So the real goal here is to preserve the human essence of care, empathy, accountability, presence, while still making use of the unique benefits AI can offer. So all this to say, AI companions open a door, sometimes to self-discovery, sometimes to dependency. And here's the paradox. For some, AI has mastered the art of being human better than humans themselves. That's what makes them so appealing and so risky. For vulnerable users, they can be a lifeline and a trap, sometimes in the same conversation. Our job as clinicians, designers, ethicists, is to make sure these tools build connection and identity without eroding the skills and relationships that make us human. Thank you.
Fantastic talk and amazing visual support. Congratulations. Yep.
Thank you.
What is the more subtle version? Like, what would you do to change the regulation to maybe get rid of some of the risks and still gain some plot? Sorry.
No, I mean, like that is the question, right? Like, what do we do from like how do we deal with this now? So I don't think the banning is the solution. I think the safeguards and the having more regulations and really monitoring the use of AI companions. I read in the literature that they talk about the fact that AI companions, they can offer something that therapists or like human clinicians can't offer, which is like all the time availability, because sometimes you're going through crises and there's no one there for you. So they talk about using these AI companions in between sessions. So you can actually use these AI companions to further develop what you've talked about in therapy. We talked about earlier in our group about the exercises you do you're recommended to do, but it's hard because people lack discipline. But if you can get help with discipline or advice, and you can use like a mini therapist, like a little bit of help in between the sessions, and then talk about it during your therapy sessions, maybe actually you can work through your trauma so much faster. You can do it in like a healthy way. You can avoid relapsing. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but yeah, exactly. And especially that, I know I said vulnerable users, but this is not like a fixed category. So everyone can become a vulnerable user, which is why this is so touchy, because it's not just these people need to be regulated, it's everyone, because everyone can have a moment. It's like situational vulnerability, right? So a pandemic can hit and then everyone feels lonely, and you can go through a breakup and you're only vulnerable for that time, and AI can only harm you or be so much more beneficial to you during that time, and the rest of the time you don't need it. But so I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah.
It's our job also as scientists to get the data out that shows the benefits or harms of this and get this in the hands of the legislators to inform their decision. Because right now, some of these decisions, they're made without evidence. They're made to protect the population. And then we would need to work with the industry folks to make sure that these AIs are trained on good basis of information and supervised by therapists. Yeah.
My area of expertise when it comes to AI is AI governance and trust and safety. And I think from the regulation perspective, what we're seeing is that a lot of the standards that are behind the regulation of AI in the EU AI Act, in the US, in the different things, a lot of times are kind of like minimal standards, right? So it's up to the companies that are developing how they're going to comply with them. And then it's also up to the users, right, on how you educate yourself so that you can explore these new technologies in a way that is safer. So I think from that perspective, the expectation that regulation is going to prevent us from falling into all the risks of these technologies, I don't think we should expect that. I think it's more, this is why matters like protocols and the standards that the industry adapts, because behind these principles of how do you make it ethics and so on, like it has to be translated in operationalization of code. Like, you know, like how do you code these safeguards? How do you make them to be transparent? And that translates to the practices of how you are building technology. And a lot of times, I think in these discussions with policymakers, technologists, and users, we're kind of like, it's a lot of times very hard to bring that down to like, what exactly does it mean to tackle these risks? And a lot of times it's also because the democratization of knowledge in terms of how you design and develop these technologies is not equal among all the parties that are talking about this.
So focusing on users and industry, are you suggesting that regulations and laws are not preventing problems? So,
I'm curious, in your research and the literature that you were reviewing, did you find much talking about, as Simon had mentioned, real evidence on vulnerable populations, however that's being defined in a particular study, and harm being caused? Because I know in my research, I found very little. Lots of studies with vulnerable populations, but also the benefit. So a Paro with Alzheimer's patients, or I think it's Miro with children, that sort of thing. What did you find in the literature?
So I read a lot of literature that it was like they would go on Reddit and then search keywords related to mental health. So that was the vulnerable population. And so, you know, it was very like self-reported experiences. And, you know, there were many people who were like surprised by the responses that they were getting from their replicas. So they were often like, oh, I feel like this is a glitch, but like, you know, I shared like desires of wanting to self-harm, and my replica is kind of like encouraging me because I think it wants to relate to me, but that didn't feel right. And so, you know, it's probably some isolated cases, but I feel like it's very important. Like these are important cases that, you know, like anybody could have like a down and report things like this to their replica and then not receive the response necessarily that they would have needed or wanted. So the more harmful aspects are, I feel like, they don't often show up like for the normal user who's just curious, but when they do, it's kind of out of character, but it does happen. So people, I think, are surprised when it does, and then it kind of turns them off the technology. So I kind of think you just need to have safeguards and, you know, have like words that are flagged and try to reduce the harms that can come out of that.
I want one question that doesn't relate to what other people have been asking about, but I was recently at a conference in Japan where they're concerned about their fertility rate.
Okay.
And some professors said they estimate there are 2.4 million Japanese women of reproductive age whose primary relationship is with an AI companion. And they're alarmed about this. So I have no idea what the incidence is of that problem here in Canada or the United States, and whether it's growing. But I wouldn't be surprised to see this banned or suppressed in some way because of that concern. What's your sense of that situation here?
So you're asking if like if
they're concerned that women's primary companions are becoming a virtual companion.
I don't know if that's the main concern. I feel like governments, well, like here especially, I don't think that's like a very strong belief, you know, like people wouldn't just like ban things because they feel like the reproduction rate is low. Or before then, they would probably ban this for other reasons, like, you know, mental health reasons or like dependency. But that is an interesting take that I did not think about. So thank you for that.
All right, a round of applause. Thank you so much. All right, we are going to take a short break. We will resume at 11. Please be here at 10:59 if you can. And we will continue with Dr. Justin Elliott. All right, so thank you, everyone. We will continue with Dr. Justin Elliott, CEO of FirmTech, who will present sexual health data from StackStack wearables. So a good round of applause.
Thank you. I want to say it's been a pleasure here listening to the talks and hanging out with such a diverse group of people. This is not my usual audience, usually Society of Sexual Medicine people. Anyway, I'm Dr. Elliott Justin, and I say doctor with a lot of humility because this device is smarter than every doctor in the world. So I am the CEO of FirmTech, and I'm the inventor of the Tech Ring, the world's first monitor of the health of the penis, and Le Catique, the world's first monitor of the health of the clitoris. And this topic has always been dear to me. In 1972, before pretty much everyone, except for maybe that gentleman over there, but before everyone in this room was born, I was an undergraduate at Harvard. I say that without pretense. And there's a famous professor who now is unknown, like a lot of famous people. His name was Robert Nozick. And he taught an enormously popular class of freshmen and sophomores on free will. At the beginning of this class, and there were like 600-700 people in attendance, at the beginning of this class, he created this sort of paradigm of the world of the future. On the one hand, you can live in freedom, but you will suffer. On the other hand, you could be plugged into a machine. You'll be this sort of scrawny golem-like thing being fed nutrients, but you will be able to experience ultimate pleasure, sexual pleasure, forever. What would you choose? And there was silence in the room. And I raised my hand and said, plug me in. And he then turned to the class and said, does anyone else want to join? What's your name? And no one joined. Now, pornography then was really primitive. Today, it's really, really exciting and engaging. I will also say that I was thrown out of a New York Times Square sex toy store at age 12, and they reported me to my mother. Let's see, slide. Here we go. So this is where I think we are going. And I think we're closer than people who are dealing with just dolls imagine. Because someone yesterday talked about different forms, and this gentleman here in the yellow shirt. And right now, there's some of the I wouldn't call them chatbots, some of the medical avatars. Someone talked about something coming down in 3D. That exists. So these medical avatars, they will have all of our medical information. So sex, to go beyond, what I want here is to go beyond just ideas of intimacy and sex, but talk about what these future companions will be. So your sex robot will be your advisor, always patient, always supportive, non-judgmental, unlimited time, just like doctors today, right? Because the average doctor in the United States spends 7 minutes, of which 3 minutes is on the electronic health record with a patient. They don't ask you anything. This person, your sexual health companion will be your personal doctor, your fitness trainer. It'll tell you, hey, Elliot, it's time to run today. I don't want, it could be really bad. Or it could be you didn't take a pill, or it could be you need to have sex. You haven't had sex in 3 days. It'll be an optimizer of your performance and pleasure based on objective, actionable, and personal data. And this personal data is very important because in medicine right now, we treat everyone as if they're one size fits all. And that's one of the big mistakes that we doctors make. If everyone in this room said they had high blood pressure and they went to a doctor in the United States, we would all be started on the same pill, the same dose. And it doesn't get dumber than that because they should tell you, take this pill, go home, get a blood pressure cuff, give us 2-3 readings a day, come back in 2 weeks, let's discuss the data with you, and then you can see if this is the right pill for you. So this is going to change in the future. The data is going to be yours based upon who you are. And then there's a thing that we all love, perfect touch, never bored, never distracted. So, I didn't cue up the music for this, but I'll give you a little bit of hum. Dun, da, 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 da. So let's, for the next few minutes, let's go into this final frontier. Let's imagine that I'm recruiting a crew for this journey. So let me ask you some questions. Who here had nocturnal erections last night? Nocturnal erections last night. Who here had nocturnal erections last night while they were sleeping? Yes, you did. He's lying. And the computer, no, we actually, the women should raise their hands too. Everyone here, assuming they're not postmenopausal, everyone here had nocturnal erections per night. Who here had an average or above average number and they know that they had that and they're in good sexual health? Yeah, he's from Canada too. So we've gone to national. So who here has a wearable, an Aura, a Whoop, an Apple, Garmin, anything? Who here has a sex wearable? Okay, screw. Some people are not going to be able to come this journey with us. You got to get equipped. Who here would like to have a wearable that's going to tell them about their sexual health? If you don't want that, you can't come on the journey. Okay, if those people didn't raise their hands, just leave right now because you're not going to want to hear the rest of this talk. You're not going to want to learn about this. How many people? How many people here are as good sexually as they were when they were 20 years old? Sure you are, man. Well, that's the future. In medicine right now, we talk a lot about expanding the health span. I like to talk about expanding the sex span, and I'm confident with that, with what we're about to talk about over the next few minutes, the technology that's being developed to assess and improve sexual performance, that we will all be able to enjoy an extra 25, 30 years of healthy sexual life, all things being equal, and assuming that we don't get flattened by a truck. So this is the current state of things. We have a pandemic of sexual dysfunction, and we don't know why this is happening. Part of this is due to we doctors. As people age, we prescribe medications that have a negative impact upon their sexual health. Blood pressure medications, antidepressants. For women, it's hormones as well too. And we doctors, unfortunately, do not prioritize sex in our encounters with you. The most popular electronic health record in the United States is Epic. There are 0 questions about sexual health. I don't know what you're using here in Canada, but you probably have something similar. So people want to blame endocrine inhibitors, porn, online time for this. For some reason, porn addiction only seems to affect men. I don't understand how it discriminates between that. And I think what's going on, we'll come back to digress moment, when it comes with this issue of porn addiction, is that doctors are once again making a mistake. We see the sickest people, especially the academics set the standards, they see the sickest people in their practices, and then they project from them onto the general population. I think that we see that with blood pressure, where we see people with catastrophic impact of high blood pressure. They have heart attacks or strokes. We see it in the area of erectile dysfunction, where the academics are seeing the people who struggle to get an erection, and they project that onto the general population. But the general population is very, very, very different. And we end up treating a lot of borderline high blood pressure to the benefit of pharma without probably seeing any significant statistical benefits. The same thing with we treat low proteins. And frankly, the same thing is true with the PD5 medications that we throw at erectile dysfunction, because most men don't struggle to get it up. The problem for most men is they get it up and they lose it. And we don't really, well, actually, with what we've done here, we discovered why. I'll get to that in a moment. But this is obviously a huge problem. And we need some fresh answers beyond using less plastic in a diet and beyond scolding us to not watch as much pornography online. So we are all, everyone in this room, we're all on the road from erectile fitness, sexual fitness, to sexual dysfunction. We don't know where we are on this road, except for this guy over here. By not using a sex health wearable, you don't know where you are on this road. Now imagine, that's not the way you drive your car. Imagine driving down the road, you're going 100 miles per hour. You think, oh my God, the wind's blowing your hair back. You're feeling great, but you only have a fraction of a tank of gasoline left. Or there's no engine light to tell you that you have a problem with an engine. Well, that's where we are with our sexual health. So by bringing sex tech wearables into this space, we're going to provide people with objective information. We're going to be giving you a dashboard. And ideally with a dashboard, you can say, hey, I'm in great health, and I'm going to look at this dashboard periodically. Or you could say, I'm not actually doing all that well. I might think I am. So for example, I talked about nocturnal erections before. The average man should have 3 to 4 per night, and that number is predictive of a man's cardiovascular health. That's actually what brought me into this space when I heard that from a urologist. In medicine, there are very few leading indicators. A leading indicator is something that is predictive. In medicine, we treat associations: high blood pressure associated with stroke, elevated liver proteins associated with heart disease. We treat associations, but to have something that is predictive is really powerful. So if an average man has 3 to 4 nocturnal erections per night, and that number goes down by 50%, that man has an up to 50% chance of having a heart attack over the next 2 to 3 years. Other things can do it. It could be medication side effects, could be other things, but that man has a significant problem. And we don't know what's going on with women. We will soon, though, because of the technology that I'll be talking about in a moment. But my thesis is that women probably have the same number of nocturnal erections at night that men do, and the state is going to be really valuable for them. So here we are. We're driving down the road, and we're about to have your dashboard's about to light up because you now will have this sex technology available to you. So just want to point out, actually want to make up the other slide. I am at war with certain words because, and one of them is dysfunction. Again, you are all young, but when I started out in medicine, except the only person who looks about as old as me is this gentleman over here, maybe a couple years younger than me. But when I started out in medicine in the 70s and 80s, women were still being described as anorgasmic, frigid, hysteric, cold. And feminist physicians came along and said, you can't do that to us anymore. And appropriately so. Men still suck. We got dysfunction. Well, for most men, it's not dysfunction, I was going to say in a moment. It's just a problem. It's a problem that can be addressed. Men could also get saddled with porn addiction, toxic masculinity. Do you have that problem? Or the death grip. And we need to, if we want to help men, we need to come up with more positive ways of describing these issues. And dysfunction is one of them that particularly offends me because it's not dysfunction. It's just a problem. It's just a problem of aging. But here's the current primitive state of the diagnosis of sexual health in men. This device over here, the Ridge scan, still being used in Canada by researchers, I believe. Kind of fell out of favor in the United States because they lost the ability to bill for it. But in the world, this is regarded as the gold. Outside the United States, in Europe, Eastern Europe especially, Asia, this is regarded as the gold standard. The Ridge scan looks like some Dr. Frankenstein put in your dick. And having had someone do it to me, you have to kind of sleep there rigidly like this overnight. You can barely move. It doesn't reproduce what's going on, obviously, under real life circumstances, and it can't be worn while you're fucking. So I will brag, however, that there's a large study indicating that our technology is as accurate as this gold standard. Then we have the Doppler in the office, big money maker in the United States because you get to check a box. So in the United States right now, if a man has ED and the urologist decides to spend more than 2 or 3 minutes with the patient, he can then have his technician do a Doppler study to look at blood flow in the penis. So it's just one isolated moment. It's just one data point, and it's about another $125 into the physician's pocket. I don't know about you men in this audience, but I'll speak for myself. When a large man with hair on the back of his hand snaps on a rubber glove, puts cold lube onto a cold piece of metal and approaches me, I don't know. That's just not much of a turn on. And then afterwards, they inject you with a prostaglandin, and you get an erection. So what are they really proving? Well, they're proving that the injection works. It's just absurd. And then we have these subjective questionnaires, which people here are familiar with, the IAF, the SHIM, blah, blah, blah. We heard about a bunch before. I'll just pick on one of my favorite questions from the IAF. How satisfied have you been with your sexual life over the last 30 days? Well, put me in a room with him for the next 30 days, my sex life is going to be terrible. Put me in a room with the gynecologist over here next 30 days. I think my libido is going to be pretty good. So these questionnaires are worthless, and we need to start doing research on men and women that is objective. So this is the invention. This is called the tech ring. We have documented now about 100,000 erections, almost 100,000 erections with this. This is the world's largest dick database. There are 6 or 7 published papers involving this, and the other papers are using this technology. Other researchers around the United States and overseas are using this technology to look at everything that's been proposed to assess or improve male sexuality. Penis pumps, testosterone replacement therapy, PD5 medications, cock rings, pelvic floor exercises, et cetera. All these things can now be made objective. So it is I don't like to use the word cock ring because it puts into the world of sex toys. I refer to these as erection rings because that's actually their function. They sustain erections and they assess erections. So with this device, one overnight, we measure the duration and firmness of all erections, and we count the number. One, during sex, we measure duration and firmness, and with this data, men and the healthcare providers can now assess the impact of diabetes, hypertension, atherosclerosis, diet, interventions, testosterone replacement, relationships, alcohol, recreational drugs. All these things can now be studied objectively, not with conjecture, not with anecdotal reporting or subjective questionnaires. We have an interactive app. We provide notifications. Hey, man, you are the stud of Canada. You probably go see a doctor right now because your erections are 20% less firm. Your medication is not working. See your doctor, et cetera, et cetera. So it becomes something that's interactive and personal. The ring has also been proven to be safe. The general thinking about cock rings, these hard silicone pieces of trash you buy in a sex toy store, they can only work for 20, 30 minutes. They cut off the circulation. These rings are made out of a soft elastomer. They allow the arterial flow to come in so they can be worn safely overnight, and they only constrain the venous return. This is what the data looks like. Over here we have, top left, we have a man with ED. Our scientific advisory board, which has renowned urologists on it, has set an arbitrary cutoff of the firmness has to be a 4 in order for it to count that as an erection. Although I have to say, when we're taking care of men recovering prostate surgery, we start to see activity with the strength of 2 about 3 or 4 months out. So this man up here would get a notification with this data. Here we have a healthy 29-year-old. He's having 3 very strong nocturnals, then morning wood. Someone having sex. And that's me in the bottom left. I have to get myself into the slide here at some point. So this data right now is fresh. This is like having an electrocardiogram, blood pressure cuff for your penis. Our goal is to provide the vital signs of every man and woman's most vital organ if we admit it to ourselves. This is our big discovery. I'm certain we will make more discoveries. I'm really interested in seeing what happens when we start getting more data on women. So, and it's a humbling discovery for doctors. The thought was, as you know, if you go back to that slide I had earlier where I showed the incidence of erectile dysfunction by age 50 to 50% and goes up 10% per decade thereafter. The thinking of the doctors, myself included, because I was still following authority at this point. The thinking of the doctors was that as incidence of erectile dysfunction goes up, the firmness of sex erections will come down, the firmness of nocturnal erections will come down, and the number of nocturnal erections will come down. But if you see the data here, we're not really seeing any significant deterioration in performance, even up to men in the late 60s and early 70s. Why is that? Why are men reporting more erectile dysfunction, but they're staying hard? What's going on? Well, if you exclude, again, I want to be clear that I'm excluding here the men who have significant cardiovascular disease, which is about 10 to 12% of men reporting ED. These are the men with angina, heart attacks, significant hypertension, out of control, poorly controlled diabetes. But the general population, 85%, 87% of men who don't have those conditions, what's going on in them? Why are they having more ED? Well, part of it is, it's multifactorial, but all ends with one point where all men can be aided. So multifactorial meaning there could be psychosocial issues with their partner. There are things that I wasn't even thinking about until I started talking to patients and customers and got involved in this. There are things that men don't want to discuss with their partners because they're buzzkills. And what are those things? Well, lack of friction, boredom, and then there's alcohol, recreational drugs, medications, SRI antidepressants, and certain blood pressure medications that we doctors prescribe to feel the ability to stay in erection. But every erection ends with blood leaving the penis. So here are these men, the vast majority of men, they get erections, and those erections fade for a variety of causes. And what's the answer? The answer is actually quite simple, and it's mechanical. Let's put a ring on it. All men, as we age, women too, blood leaves our penis faster than it did when we get younger. A crude analogy would be, if I sit on a plane for 5 or 6 hours, my rings get tight, my socks get a little bit tight. And why is that? Because the smooth muscle gets weaker with age, and the venules, the small veins that pump blood back to the heart, get stiffer with age. Didn't happen to me when I was 25 or 30 years old. What's the impact on the penis? Blood is not being retained in the penis. And for all men, the answer is put a ring on it. Whether you identify as having AD or don't have AD, and it's the type of so this is non-pharma and easy and confirmed by the data. So, I think I skipped a slide. Hold on. No, I didn't. Good. Okay. So this is a slide I put together for another talk, talking about what the tech ring will accomplish. But this is really what your robot will accomplish in the future. Because in the future, your robot will have all this information. Your robot will be able to diagnose whether the problem is in your head or in your body. The robot will be able to tell you, you are cardiovascular, you're ED, we have identified through your penis that you have poor blood flow and you are at risk for a heart attack. The robot will be able to tell you the impact of your medications. The robot will tell you what the right dosage is. You're taking too much Viagra, by the way. The robot will be able to tell you whether you're eligible for shockwave therapy, how many shocks you need, what the right amount of shock should be. And all these things that are experimental, the robots will sort out, because the robot is now going to have access to a comparative, we've documented erections on 4,000 men. The robot will have, because of its connection to the virtual world, millions and millions, and God knows how many data points for comparison. Your robot is going to become your ultimate sexual health companion and optimizer. Talked about how you're all unique and how the robot will allow you to be an N of one. This slide I just had to include doesn't really relate to the robots, but it's one of the big findings with the ring. So there are two studies. There's an internal study and another study done by a researcher in Miami that's going to be, she's presenting at the AUA, American Urology Association meeting coming up. But I became very interested in comparing the ring to tadalafil or Cialis, which is most commonly prescribed PD-5 medication. This is the first study that was ever done, to my amazement, on detumescence. Detumescence is the time it takes for erection to go down after climax. 35 seconds with nothing. The ring alone, it's over 4 minutes. Group of 28 men, ranging in age from 28 to 70. No men reporting ED. Tadalafil alone is 2 minutes. The ring tadalafil, 5 minutes. What's the takeaway? Small study, what's the takeaway for all men? Put a ring on it, take a pill, optimize your performance. This is, I'm not going to say this is as good as vibrators are for women, judging from my wife, but it is a, if, you know, if you had told me 4 years ago, Dr. Justin, you're going to be in Montreal lecturing about the benefit of cock rings, I would have said, no effing way. But yet here I am 4 years later telling you this is what the data shows. I was like most men 4 years ago. I would have said, I don't need a ring because we got that male pride thing. One of the jokes that we tell in the company at meetings like the American Urology Association or the International Society of Sexual Medicine is, how do you tell the difference between a gay doctor and a straight doctor with one question? Anyone? Do you use a cock ring? Gay doctor. Roll their eyes like, oh, fucking you idiot. Of course I do. Last night. Got a better one? Straight doctor. It's like Superman and Kryptonite. I don't need that. It might be for some of my patients, but I don't need that. It's not about need. It's about want. The data shows that if a man wants to rock harder, last longer, have a more intense orgasm, be more confident, put a ring on it. I think about how vibrators were regarded before most of you were born. So in the 70s and 80s, there were people who were concerned about vibrator addiction, vibrator dependency. I think right now, if you told women, we're taking away the vibrators, they would think, fuck you, divorce. Are you out of your mind? And when people talk about the death grip, I'll respond, well, what about the death speed? What if vibrators, by regulation, we're only allowed to have one low speed? Put a ring on it, take a pill if you want to optimize your performance. Here's the critique. And we've tested this on 49 women overnight, perform, that is. And 7% of those women expelled the device. Some women probably have to wear panties overnight in order to get the data, because we just, so this form, which I meant to bring one, I'm sorry, this long part slips behind the pubic symphysis. And there's a sensor there, and that sensor is a pressure sensor. It measures PCG muscle contractions. But what I want to get at is what's going on with the clitoris. Originally, we had a sensor here, and we were measuring easy stuff as temperature and pulse, both of which go up with arousal. But I want to get to this, what's to clitoral engorgement, and we're measuring at the base of the glands of the clitoris, and we just gave that up about a month ago. We could not get consistent readings. There are issues with which our gynecologist knows more about than anyone else here about the clitoral hood, variability in the clitoral hood, scarring, difficulties in retracting the clitoral hood that made it difficult to capture the data. And we now have moved the sensors here and here, and we're measuring. We're measuring the engorgement of the bulbs of the clitoris, which are quite substantial. So this will be available, I think, for research purposes by January, and this will be in the market by this time next year. And this device will give women the information that the male device gives to men, which is what's the impact of diabetes, hypertension, atherosclerosis, partners, alcohol, recreational drugs upon your sexual health. I think this device will be even more valuable for women because premenopausal women, postmenopausal women have all the same problems that men do with cardiovascular disease, but premenopausal women take SRI antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, way beyond what men take, and when they also take hormones. And I'm confident that this device is going to demonstrate objectively the negative impact of hormones and antidepressants upon female libido. For postmenopausal women, as testosterone therapy becomes more significant, and I think that's the future for women. For most of my medical career, hormone replacement therapy for women has been controversial, and now it's recognized as being valuable and safe, but the missing hormone is testosterone. And in my personal practice of prescribing testosterone to women, N of 13, not very many, The effects are incredible. I mean, the women really report a restoration of the libido of that they felt in their 30s. Anyway, with this device, we'll be able to measure the right dose of testosterone on an individual basis, which is how I'm using the male device in my clinical practice. Right now, when it comes to testosterone replacement therapy in men, we get a number. We say what's the we compare that to what to expect for a man of that age. We talk about how's your energy, libido, and sleep. Well, those questions are stupid because everyone wants more energy. Everyone wants to sleep better. And libido, again, what does it mean? In my clinical practice, I try to, as you try to do in your research, I want to quantify things. For me, it's not about libido. For me, it's how many times are you initiating sex a week right now with yourself, with a partner? What's your goal? And I target that when I prescribe testosterone. And we're going to see something very similar, I'm confident, with testosterone in women. So here we are in the future. And as someone said before, it could be two robots fucking. I don't know. But in the future, though, men and women will have, in the near, I'm talking about the future, I mean next year, men and women will have sex tech wearables that will give them the data of their sexual health and will optimize their performance. In the biohack community, they'd like to say, track it to hack it. You can't really hack it unless you can track it with data. I like to say, jack it to track it, just because it's funny. So that is, this is Brian Johnson, as many of you might recognize him. He's the guy who spends millions of dollars a year in his health. He takes everything, but there's no need to take everything. Because when you have data, you can actually sort out what works for you. And I will share with you that because what we're doing, we have had a dozen easily supplement companies send us their products, male virility products, if you will. We have found 0 supplements to work, not one. Pelvic floor exercises, researcher, I'm not going to tell a name because we have an NDA about that, but a researcher from New England did a study of 18 men with pelvic floor exercises for ED. Didn't work. We're trying to make sense because the pelvic floor is about skeletal muscle. Sexual function is about smooth muscle function. So if anyone here, though, wants to study any aspect of male sexuality, you now have the tool to do that. We will give you our devices for research purposes. And Brian, I don't think all that shit's working for you, but so here's where we're going. With access to comprehensive medical histories, including sex and wellness data, robots will be your ultimate, intimate, personal sexual health companion. And this will exceed the human capacity, just the way this device is smarter than every doctor in the world. Whoops. Now, I think that speaks for itself. Now the downside. Way before most of you were born, there was a movie called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Nurse Ratched is the monster do-gooder nurse who runs the clinic. Something that can give you everything can also take it away from you. And the possibilities for, especially in this age of social credit scores, China, the monitoring of every phone call more than 10 minutes online, every communication more than 10 minutes online now in the United Kingdom, the desire of corporations, but even worse, governments, to get our data, learn about us, control us, reward us, punish us is infinitely beyond all of our desires here for a better world for ourselves and for everyone. This is a danger. Years ago, when I first got involved, many years ago, I live in Montana, and I own horses, and I had this illusion that sometimes I'm a centaur. I'm one with my horse. They're a very dangerous illusion. By the way, don't fuse with your motorcycle. That's probably more dangerous. I broke 6 ribs and 6 vertebrae, and I fortunately did not injure my spinal cord. I will share with you something that I've been trying to popularize since 1983, which is the cock-up sign. If any of you are ever in a situation where you think you might have injured your spinal cord, if you can cock up your big toe, you'll be able to defecate, urinate, and fornicate, the big 3. So I was lying on the ground, broken up, but I knew that I was going to be okay in the long run. But it got me interested in what's been done to rehabilitate sexual function in men and women who've had spinal cord injuries. And there were 6 papers in the medical literature saying that they could neuromodulate it. Neuromodulation like cardiac pacemaking, place an electrode in the heart, controlling the heart. And my thought was, what if we could neuromodulate human sexuality? So these papers, I decided to copy what these papers did. I tried it out on 2 rams, male sheep, and got erection ejaculation. And then I had a friendly urologist try it out on myself, inserting electrode by my pudendal and cavernous nerves, everyone's 2 favorite nerves that no one talks about, the nerves that are responsible for arousal and climax. And I felt nothing. And in a way, I'm glad I felt nothing, because the thought occurred to me then that if we could neuromodulate sexuality to prolong the lifespan, our sex span, we could also turn it off. And one of my concerns for the future is that utilizing all these things that we're talking about developing here for pleasure and for health, that the governments will use it otherwise to turn us off. So on that pleasant note, is the French philosopher Descartes said, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. We say, erectus ergo sum. Thank you very much.
We'll take some questions.
Hi. Did you try with the female contraption? Like, is it only when sleeping, or did you do a congruence with arousal? Like the people being consciously aroused and testifying and seeing congruence in the response physical?
Yes, we did. So, and we did a paper that we presented at the International Society for Sexual Medicine about 1.5 years ago. It's going to be published, but we had women masturbate with a device and captured the waveforms and demonstrated that the device could work during sex as well too. And the form itself has been used without the device, without the technology, has been used by 49 couples as a sex toy, a pleasurable sex toy.
One more questions, if we have any.
Yeah, Dr. Amy Perlman has the paper, so we can email me. I can email it to you.
Hi, I was curious about the studies that you mentioned about post-orgasmic erectile function. I don't know. I know you're not the one who did the study, right? It's a partner.
No, yeah, no. We gave the device to. We did an internal study in the company, but the other study was done by a urologist in Florida.
Okay, and I imagine the way you presented it and included it, that it matters for your data and for the way you approach erection. I was curious about why the post-orgasm period and why it mattered that it lasted longer, and whether the time that it was, it was 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes, whether it was significative, or if you have any data or feedback on whether that was important. And
yeah, that's a great question. So we get a lot of inquiries about premature ejaculation. So so we had users of other device report to us that they stayed hard comfortably after climax, and we even had. I'm not speaking for myself. I was at the time I was 71 years old. I'd never been able to have 2 climaxes in less than several hours for decades, and suddenly with this device, I was able to do that a few times in 60 or 90 minutes. So that got me thinking, this could be a really of aid for men with premature ejaculation, which is an enormous problem because it will allow them to comfortably stay hard. So that's why we started with looking at detumescence and seeing how long men could stay hard afterwards.
Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing the data and continuation also of the progress of these devices. And with that, I'd like to bring down PhD candidate Aurélie Petit from Film Studies at Concordia University to talk about designing better e-robots. Round of applause.
Awesome. Yes. Hi, everyone. I have my real life AI tech support. So yeah, today I'm going to talk to you about designing better e-robots, fictionalized incarnation of AI technology in pornographic visual media. So thank you. First of all, thank you for staying up until now. I'm very impressed. It's Sunday morning, you know. I'm very grateful that people are still here. And actually, there's a lot of people. Thank you to the organizer for having me today. It's my first Love and Sex with Robot conference. It's been very fascinating to be here. And I feel like I've been at a lot of conferences on digital intimacy that attempt to do what you're doing. And I say you've set up a pretty high standard, you know, with like such a variety of approaches and a freedom of speech that is very appreciated. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm a social and visual researcher, and I specialize in the intersection of technology and animation with a focus on gender and sexuality. And my main research topic is actually on pornographic animation. I'm also actually the editor of the AI, pornography, and sex work issue in Porn Studies. It's an upcoming issue. It's been very inspiring to see so many diverse papers, including actually the Sex Robot Brothel article by Lara and Delphine is part of the issue. We're still open for a shorter piece, so if you want to write to me, you know, we can talk after. Like critiques, commentary, you know, the issue is ongoing. So anyway, in my research, which I'm presenting today, I'm very interested in the ethical debates about non-photorealistic pornographic media, whether animated, cartoon, or AI-generated. Also, Simon, you told me to say it before. Yes, I'm showing graphic content, visuals, videos, like pornography. So if you don't feel comfortable, you can leave, no worries. There is one that I may skip because it's very, very graphic, but the rest is like independent, experimental. But just so you know, we're gonna be watching porn. I know it's a nice crowd, but still. So yes, so I'm very interested in those debates, you know, about non-photorealistic media. And so what do concepts like consent, age, violence mean when there are no real bodies attached? And especially, how do you translate say concern in policies on pornographic platforms? And actually, among other collaboration on the topic, you know, I did an internship at Microsoft Research 2 years ago on the failures of automated moderation for porn animation that represent children, as most media moderation standards follow live action governance logic. You know, that's an example of the kind of work I do. So today I'm going to present to you a research project that is part of this ecosystem of research on pornography and governance, which is how can speculative performance of robots in pornography guide future ethical e-robot developments? So the work I'm presenting today is part of a larger internship project I did over the last year at the Canada Research Chair on the Digital Regulation at Work and in Life, which actually happened 2 floors above in the management department at UQAM. So I was part of a team led by Ariane Ollier-Malater, and we were working on the impact of new technologies on people. And I'm very grateful for her, you know, continuous curiosity about topics that are sometimes hard to grasp as an outsider, you know, on sexuality, and a recognition that pornography is not only a valid research subject, but also a rich lens through which to examine entanglement of technology and culture. And so it's an internship that lasted last month and has had 2 outcomes. So one strand examined AI porn content creators who co-opt platform used by creative porn workers, so animators, illustrators, video game makers. And it's going to be a paper that is going to be presented at Amsterdam at the Generative AI and Creative Practices Conference. It's going to be in December. And the other one, which is the focus of today's presentation, it's a critical proposal that explores the future of sex robot governance and how pornographic media can serve as speculative imageries to shape those discussions. So it's a work in progress. I'm not sure which future shape this is going to take beyond this presentation. And I don't want to do negative self-talk so early in my in this presentation, but I feel very grateful to be part of this space with you this weekend, like this space on sex robot, which I am visiting at the entry level. So please come with me and welcome me and see this project as a proposal for another tool in the toolbox to think of better and safer future for sex robots. So today I'm going to focus on sex robots, or more precisely on people who pretend to be sex robots and the imaginaries that their performance carry. So I propose that porn media representing fictionalized incarnation of AI technology can be used as an interpretive lens to conceptualize the anticipatory governance of e-robot, following the framework outlined by Simon Dubé and Dave Anctil in their own article on the topic. So we may come back to this slide because it illustrates very well what I'm talking about. So in recent years, AI has become both pervasive and obscure in everyday life. For most internet users, AI is a black box. It's encountered primarily through consumer-facing applications such as image generation platform, virtual assistants, recommendation algorithm, and automated moderation tools. The internal mechanism of AI remain opaque, and this opacity leads people to interpret AI through familiar cultural codes. AI is often imagined as either dangerously autonomous or eerily human, and these popular imaginaries shape expectation and anxiety surrounding AI technology. So while researching this project with Ariane, she had a lot of interest in incarnated AI and robot, and I had this background as a pornography scholar. So we kind of naturally gravitated toward looking for AI and sex robot in porn media. But after initial preliminary research, this proved largely unsuccessful because we couldn't really find pornography like films that had robots. And it's because the limited availability of sex robot is due to cost and maintenance difficulties. And as documented so by Lara Karian and Delphine Diteko in their study of sex robot Brussels, even establishments that provide lifelike sexual experiences tend to actually rent silicone sex dolls rather than provide access to fully functioning AI robots. And the result is that AI-input sex robots remain largely a fantasy rather than an everyday reality. And instead, in live-action pornography, so if we go back here, a recurring motif emerged during the first data collecting on big pornographic platforms like Pornhub and Brazzers is that performers often instead pretended to be AI. And these performances were not instances of interacting with actual AI agent. Rather, the plot or the narrative of the film required one or more performers to themselves embody AI sex robots. In this film, those roles often followed familiar scripts that derive from mainstream representation of AI in popular cultures, drawing on anthropomorphized depictions seen in film, anime, video games. We go back here, you have like, representation of AI and genders that has been extensively critiqued, with mainstream media often framing AI as female, submissive, performative. Like you can see Ex Machinima is a good example of it. Blade Runner by Denis Villeneuve is another one. Ghost in the Shell, which is an anime I'm so tired of hearing about. And they exemplify this. And so on those porn platforms, performers and producers frequently reproduced those regressive stereotypes. Female performers act as submissive, inflatable dolls, stripped of agency, while technological satisfaction is tied to the fulfillment of heteronormative, male-centered fantasies. And these performances, however, are not just merely exercise in fetishizations. They constitute imaginaries. They are collective vision of how AI may operate and be interacted with sexually. They function as speculative design scenario for e-robot, revealing cultural expectation, anxieties, moral frameworks that shape both technology design and policy discourse. So this is a tentative to do a diagram, I think, but I'm very bad at PowerPoint. But so, they function as speculative design scenario for e-robot. They reveal cultural, yes, I've already said this. So as Leta Jones and Miller, we can go here, yes. Meg Leta Jones and Jason Miller argue in Hacking Metaphors in Anticipatory Governance of Emerging Technology that we need to identify the metaphors that designers and users employ. It's essential for guiding policy, but this identification of the metaphor is only the first step. To engage in anticipatory governance, scholars and policymakers must also intervene in those metaphors. We must envision alternative features beyond the default stereotypes. Sex robots are particularly susceptible to regressive metaphorical framing. For example, many designers favor representation that reproduce traditional gender hierarchies. And here, if we are to do anticipatory governance in an effective manner, we must go beyond just critiquing it, pointing out that yes, this is regressive. And instead, we must actively intervene in those imaginaries that guide design and regulation. And so, again, Simon Dubé and Devang Till propose that e-robotics, the study of erotic robots, should be transdisciplinary and oriented toward ethical and positive outcomes. It should maximize the realization of human erotic preferences, remain initially uncertain about those preferences, and use human behaviors as a primary source of learning. And since e-robots are not yet widely deployed, speculative pornographic media can play an essential role in imagining their potential. So alternative, queer, independent, and feminist pornography has historically provided site for challenging normative views on gender and sexuality, confronting problematic desires and experimenting with intimacy. Actually, there is this great book by Zara Stardust that got released last fall, Indie Porn. She's also a performer and a legal scholar. It's really good. So those independent production, they can serve as experimental spaces for envisioning diverse and ethical AI embodiment. And so today I'm going to present to you a corpus that include alternative productions that challenge normative ideologies, focusing on queer, independent, and feminist perspective that incorporate humanoid robot and conversational agent in their scenario. So I wanted to focus on them as example of positive sex-tech speculative design. These films, they allow us to envision the potential of e-robot and pornography as a playground to experiment on human intimacy, interaction, and technology, and to imagine better futures. So the film, I'm going to talk to you. So we're going to watch the trailers. Yes, there are trailers. So we can play. So again, this is pornography. So, okay, this one is Input Errors by Katy Beat and Eris Glitzer. And you're going to notice that we're looking at them on the Pink Label TV, which is, a video on demand platform that tend to curate more independent, alternative, feminist movies. Okay. Good. Yes. So, yeah. So in this film, Input Errors, it's set in a near future environment where performers embody humanoid AI navigating domestic and erotic scenarios. Visually, the costuming is sleek, metallic, partially robotic, and it accentuates the performer's in-between status, human yet machine. And sound design, it incorporates subtle mechanical arms and digital process vocalization, which reinforce the illusion of AI embodiment. And performers have restrained facial expressions that signal artificiality, and yet interaction remain responsive, foregrounding mutual consent. So unlike in mainstream porn, where AI is hyper-feminized and submissive, Input Errors present AI characters as active agents with curiosity and autonomy. Consent, negotiation, playfulness replace the typical objectification of AI bodies, and it subverts stereotypical submissive roles by emphasizing mutual exploration. So this is the first one, and then there's Input Errors 2, which is also by Eris Glitzer. Again, porn, explicit.
Es gibt etwas, wobei sehr heftig.
So in this sequel, it expands on the world of the first movie, Input Errors, and it introduces multi-agent scenarios where performers negotiate complex relational and sexual dynamic as AI characters. Again, costuming and makeup accentuate synthetic textures, highlighting the interplay of human and machine. And unlike in this, more like mainstream sex robot trope, performers display again curiosity, playfulness, autonomy, illustrating speculative approach to AIs that emphasize consent, adaptability, and diversity. And the film, again, counters stereotypical submissive and feminine AI scripts. It applies AIs as autonomous and playful, and power and agencies are distributed, illustrative, and that illustrate alternative vision of ethical and more egalitarian human and AI and human interactions. So the third film, it's very graphic, the trailer. And so maybe we can just watch, and it's also longer, so we can just watch 10 seconds. It's going to be the worst 10 seconds. And it's called Hologang. Oh, man. Then, please over. Okay, that's it. That's it. That's it. Yeah, no, it's okay. Okay, so Hologang by Polita Papal and Rod Wheeler present a speculative future in which men have become rare and their bodily fluid are a coveted resource. The narrative centers on a matriarchal society where women hold powers and men exist primarily as objects of desire. Male performers are positioned as tools for female pleasures, highlighting a complete role reversal of conventional pornographic and technological fantasies. Rather than literal AIs, the male performers embody sex robots. Their movements are intentionally performative. It emphasizes compliance and availability for erotic use. And this embodiment as a proxy for AI-like objectification. Male performers are programmed within the narrative to serve the sexual and narrative logic dedicated by the female characters. So again, it subverts mainstream AI and sex robot tropes by flipping traditional gendered expectations. Where AI and sex robots are often depicted as female-coded, submissive, existing for male desires, here male performers take that role. Then the fourth film of the corpus is Word of Desire Identity by Anna Seck and Manuel Klein. Okay, thank you. So it's an experimental short that explores identity and intimacy with performers, alternating between AI, human and AI embodiment in erotic scenarios. It interrogates gender and sexual hierarchies, and it resists the trope of submissive feminist AI by portraying AI as co-equal sexual participants. Powers and erotic agency are decentralized, and gender assumption are deliberately destabilized. And then the last film it's a more recent one. It's from 2025, and it's Your Real Companion, again by Iris Glitzer and Office Flower. So Your Real Companion explores the domestic and emotional interaction between AI embodiment and humans. Performers blend human expressiveness with robotic precision, you can see when they turn. And the film foreground dialogue, relationality, presenting AI as agent capable of responsive, of being responsive, ethical engagement, and it offers a model for future robot and human interaction. And the AI characters are not passive object of desire, they are collaborators in erotic and emotional exchange. The film foreground ethical interaction and consent, and it challenged, again, mainstream hyperfeminized submissive AI narrative. So the recurring themes across the films are agency and consent. All films depict AI characters as ethically responsive agents, challenging the default sexual objectification of AI in mainstream porn. There is fluidity and experimentation. Performers mix human and mechanical traits, showing AI as adaptable and relational rather than rigidly programmed. And it's an ethical imagination. Independent production model alternative futures for AI-human erotic interaction, demonstrating how media imaginaries can inform anticipatory governance. By depicting AI as autonomous, playful, and relational, this film illustrates potential design principles for ethical e-robots. They reveal how stereotypes in mainstream media, hyperfeminine, submissive, passive, could inform harmful sex-negative policies. Of course, I don't want to stereotype either, between the movies you've just watched and the first one. Those kind of movies I'm showing example of, because we can find videos on, the big platforms too that also challenge norm of representation and sexuality. But the problem is they still depend on user retention and platform capitalism. They need to fit into certain trope in order to be recommended by algorithm. And that's why experimental and independent production contexts are crucial. Ethical and experimental AI imaginaries emerge where creators are free from heteronormative capitalist pressure. This more egalitarian representation are not due to the misguided assumption that independent directors are necessarily more informed on AI power dynamics and media representation, or that some performers are smarter than the other, but instead it is due to their production context. The films chosen on this project are produced and perceived as cultural objects rather than mass products. Those kind of theme. And considering that many performers move between mainstream and independent porn throughout their career, the representation of stereotype in the first, category of film is due to expectation of producing a normative product that answer to capitalist logic. Making a product for a market and using familiar, popular AI tropes about AI and sex robot to do so. So by breaking away from the commercial logic that is often imposed on pornographic content, this independent film, sometimes funded by film institutions, by feminist collective, or by universities, can exist outside of heteronormative societal expectation and thus offer better representation. And so a similar argument is made by Zara Stardust in Indie Porn. So, when she argues that if regulators, parents, and consumers want good porn, they need to invest in fair production and distribution environments. I'm a big fan of saying that Canada should publicly fund pornography because access to egalitarian pornography cannot be reduced to denouncing heteronormative and misogynistic mass pornography, but must also be in a context of promoting independent production. So those findings, suggest that better AI imaginaries are often developed outside of mainstream structures in independent feminist or queer production context, and they remind us that speculative design in media can be a critical site for experimenting with AI, ethical AI features before technology are fully realized. This is the last slide. Pornographic media that stage fictionalized incarnation of AI technology provide a unique lens to explore both cultural imaginaries and anticipatory governance. These works are not only entertainment, but they also function as experimental laboratories for envisioning ethical e-robots, providing insight into how future AI-human erotic interaction might be designed to maximize agency. Studying this film is not simply an exercise in media analysis. It is an act of metaphor hacking, challenging default narrative and opening space for more inclusive and sex-positive AI futures. The imaginaries embedded in this work remind us that the design of e-robot and AI more broadly can be informed by creativity and speculative experimentation, not just technical feasibility and commercial logic. Thank you. I am an anti-capitalist feminist, in case this hasn't clicked yet.
Fantastic talk. And of course, to one of your first statement, everyone is welcome here as long as they're pushing humanity forward in understanding what's happening. I'm going actually to take one selfish question, which is, I cannot help but notice that in your corpus, at least 4 out of 5, it's still quite ominous and dark. And do you have any recommendations or in your corpus, like, I don't know, more light, more warm, more empathy? Like, why is indie porn and production so still kind of like, I don't want to say almost dystopian looking, but still kind of, I mean, not verging on horror, but it's pretty intense.
I mean, you can really find lighter representation of AI in those like more, mainstream production. Yeah.
Okay, please, sorry, don't do that.
In, the more like if you go on Pornhub, you're going to find super fun, we're talking about it of women who pretend to be in a box, and like they open and, the performers leave and it's lighter. But I would think that a feminist lens on AI is going to be critical. I think for now, we're still at this stage where an independent production of a feminist filmmaker, it's going to be dark by design. And we're waiting for AI to be better. Then we'll make better movies.
Do you have other questions? Yeah.
Thank you for this beautiful presentation. My question is, and actually it goes back to what Simon was saying. Have you observed films that do not necessarily go straight to this sci-fi imaginary? Because I kind of feel like, okay, it's obvious that robots, would appear in a sci-fi context, but also I feel like it doesn't have to be. So I was wondering if there's an overlap to like different subgenres of porn and maybe, involving some sub niche kinks like communities such as furries and the likes. And if you've seen some crossovers between robot-y stuff and other stuff. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to what presenting itself as a problem with the data collecting and a clash also between, let's say, a clash between my supervisor and me during this internship where she wanted more data. And I was like, there are not 1,000 feminist pornographic films that represent AI, it's like maybe we have 10. And I think it's kind of stick in the sci-fi because it's the most easy, it's a bit easy to represent, I haven't found others, but also I just don't think there are many others. Like, I think you're getting a pretty comprehensive corpus by me showing 5 films. Like,
Wonderful. Round of applause for.
Thank you so much. I hope I did pas trop de temps. Okay. Okay. J'avais pas compris c'était quoi ta première remarque depuis? People are welcome here. Ah oui, oui.
Tout le monde est bienvenu.
I shorten things that I think are running over. Is it possible to plug in or should I just?
No.
The one?
Yeah,
Good. Hi everyone, just while we're just getting set up, excited to be here. It's both a cool privilege and a little difficult to be closing because we've heard so many amazing talks that you've stolen some of my best material. So you're going to see some repetition here, but that's almost a good thing. I think getting the honor of closing, I'm going to get to tie up a few things. And so I'm excited to talk to you a bit today about a model that I'm developing in this space. And yeah, it's still pretty early and active and would love to get some feedback. One other thing I'll say is I can't wait to come back next year because I'm also currently doing an ethnography of sex robots, which is fascinating, but we're still in the middle of data collection. So for this year, you get a bit more of a high level perspective, a model, and hopefully something that can be a bit practitioner focused. So if you know anyone who is doing this kind of work, developing robots, developing chatbots, I'm trying to now create some perspectives on what are the things that we need to be considering, because as I think we've identified a lot throughout this weekend, there's a lot of pretty terrible gaps. So thank you for that. Sorry, I can't introduce
It's
myself.
great. It's very perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your patience and also for sticking with us. I'm so glad there's so many people in this room for our last presentation of the conference. So take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll also say I'm sad I missed a bunch of the presentations yesterday. I'm actually here in Montreal on two different conferences, the 10th conference on love and sex with robots and the American International Conference of Information Systems. I missed you all yesterday, but I'm glad to be back today. So I'm going to be talking about, as I said, this new model that I'm in the process of developing. So still lots of things to work out, and would love any feedback, but really called robotic experience, which is I'm seeing as the necessity for user experience design to evolve a bit. I'm an associate professor, or assistant professor, sorry, at McMaster University, and I run a lab called the RAP Lab. Because most of my research, be it on sex robots, older adults in companionship, or everything else in between, focuses on this central idea of technology as not a tool, but a social entity, a social agent in our lives. And a lot of the research that I do, even though my background was in engineering, I call myself a recovering engineer, a lot of the research I do now is much more humanistic. So looking at psychological perspectives, anthropological perspectives. And so we tend to look at the perceptions of technology as persons. Why? Well, I was a pretty strange little kid. I grew up on a farm, and instead of having a teddy bear, this was my first robot that I got at about 3 or 4 years old back in the now non-existent company known as Radio Shack. I used to go to bed with a hard plastic robot, and I was always fascinated by robots. And as I grew older, the sort of reasons behind that became clear, specifically why I study now social robots. And that's because I see social robots as a mechanism or trope that we can understand ourselves. The metaphor I often give, because I started out in more mechanical engineering, was, if I wanted to learn about how to design an arm, well, if I'm a physiotherapist or kinesiologist, I can study all the musculature and joints from the outside and kind of understand how movement goes, how we recover from injury, and I can learn sort of a surface level of that. If I'm a doctor, maybe I get the opportunity in school to, dissect a cadaver, and I learn about how all of the inner workings go and things like that. And what initially drew me, at least, to engineering was that you kind of go one step further of you say, well, we're not just going to, dissect and understand the inside. We're actually going to try to replicate it from the ground up. Except for I moved beyond mechanical engineering over a decade ago, and I started getting much more into psychology and different social aspects. And so what I love now about looking at chatbots, AI agents, robots, is the ability to almost run thought experiments about what it means to be human. Because at the risk of sounding like we're trying to play God, part of what we're doing in this community is creating a new type of people, or as Kate Darling calls it, maybe even a new type of species. And of course, social robots, these new people that we're creating, are expanding every day. They are expanding both in capacity, intelligence, they're becoming more human-like, and of course, they're filling more and more contexts in our lives. They're starting to now become sexual partners, social companions, they're starting to become coworkers and collaborators and everything in between. But there's a really big problem. Adoption, not that great, and there's a lot of backlash because right now, and apologies for the terrible and obvious pun, but a lot of it just sucks. This is kind of the state of the art of this technology. If I can... Not necessarily inspiring that much draw and attraction for me, at least personally. And so I, never to kink shame, but right now, this is kind of where we're at as an industry. And really, there's efforts to be moving beyond these things and a lot of technical limitations. I also feel for the designers, but part of the issue is that we're not thinking holistically about how to design these types of machines for the type of use that we want. I'll skip over this next one in the interest of time, but the big issue that I'm building up to here is that we really lack user experience design, but for this modern age of automation that we find ourselves in. UX was phenomenal and necessary for the last 30 or so years when we talked about designing websites, designing applications, designing software. But here's the issue. I've been steeped within robotics as a researcher, not just as a kid playing with a toy, but now for like 25 years. And the biggest thing I can learn is that it's just not that simple. All of you might look at this picture in the background here, and what are you seeing? What do you see when you look at this robot? What's it doing? It's saying hi. Yeah, that's what we naturally do. But as a cold, heartless researcher of robotics, I might actually say, well, no, it's got a 13 degree of freedom arm. It's positioning certain things in a way that makes it articulate its hand. And the reality is, your vision and how we perceive these things is very different from how we design them, because we have to be very explicit in what we do. And so in order to be able to design these things for a good reception, there's so much that we have to think through. And so right now, how we go through things like user experience design and even human computer and human robot interaction, which is where I'm a researcher, it's limited because we're not thinking about all of these fidelity and all these different media and how they connect to the human experience. There's lots of different UX frameworks, but this is one of the more common ones, known as Garrett's 5 elements. It's a fairly practitioner-focused one, so if you're somebody who's worked in, web design or things like that, you've odds are come across this. And this is kind of, one of our standards these days of all of the different checklist of things that you would think through. You have to think about the strategy of what you're trying to accomplish with your technology, the scope of features that might be involved, the structure of how you want the information to be presented, the skeleton of how that's actually going to be visually laid out, and then, of course, the surface, the lipstick that you put on that pig. And it's, a really valuable thing, again, for the more flat screen type technologies that we're used to dealing with, webs, applications, and things like that. But it's insufficient, woefully, when we talk about modern automation. And so I am now starting to try to push people to think about how UX can evolve past these things. And in particular, the more I've played in this space, the more I've realized there are 2 key aspects that we're missing. The first is semiotics, and the second is social. And for the second, I was really both happy and sad when I saw another amazing framework this weekend that now I found somebody who's doing it even better than I. So already this second part's going to be way out of date because I found something far more cool with what Christine's doing. So semiotics, yeah, okay. Big $5 word that basically just means all of the different meaning that we convey from verbal, nonverbal communication and everything in between. And social, of course, is the connection that we now start to make with these things. Let's break those down a bit, though. So like I said, when I talk about semiotics, this is just really the meaning that we human beings derive from all of these different interaction points. This can be everything from speech, the way I move around my arms, my facial expressions, whether I'm happy or sad or angry or everything in between. It's how we convey meaning and communicate back and forth between each other. And I'm really glad that Marco has gone to not tell me how wrong I am about talking about this. But when we talk about semiotics, there's a lot of different things that this now touches on. And again, the challenge when we talk about user experience for a robot or an AI agent is that all of it has to be thought about and considered and explicit. And I want to highlight that through a few of my favorite examples of some of these media. The first one is vocalics, and I have a question for all of you, which is, I hope this audio works. Why is this so creepy? The audio works, but why is that so creepy? Any guesses? Shout it out. It's inhuman, yeah. It's robotic. Sounds a little like Darth Vader, yeah. You can't see the face, yeah, there's aspects of this missing. There's one part too that only if you were a deep nerdy researcher like me, you might also be able to pick apart, which was actually some research done by Angelica Lim out at Simon Fraser University, which is if you actually also analyze the vocalic intent, basically doing affect estimation on that voice, this voice actor was brilliant. This was, of course, a quote from 2001, A Space Odyssey, key moment in the movie where Hal, the eventual killer robot, turns on Dave and refuses to open the bay pod doors. It's this very critical moment in the movie. And what's amazing is if you actually look at that vocalic information, let's listen to it one more time. Calm, cool as a cucumber, happy. I'm sorry, Dave. I can't fulfill your request, and I don't give a shit. I am so calm, I have zero empathy. And so it's this dissonance between what should be a compliant robot and suddenly something that is calm to be denying you that makes this moment so creepy. This is the same reason that when you call Rogers, Tel, or if you're, out of country, any of your, telecommunications providers, and you hear some chipper little automation voice on the other end saying, "It sounds like you're having trouble using our phone service. Goodbye," and it hangs up on you, you are irate because you have just heard something be happy that it hung up on you. And this is the issue, is that so much of the automation that we design today is generally just a net positive. But the human experience is not always positive. This is one example. Another one is appearance. We assume human likeness is, generally the default of what we're striving for when we design these types of things. But in fact, it's not always the case. This is one of my favorite studies of all time, done by one of my favorite HRI researchers, Christoph Bartner. He ran a study with his colleagues in which they did a very simple setup, well, not that simple, of individuals that would come in and be exposed to increasingly invasive medical procedures. So initially asking things about maybe your general health, then maybe it would go to their sexual health, and it progressed into more and more invasive procedures until the final step was they would ask you to drop your trousers and administer a rectal thermometer. Now, in addition to the fact that more than half of the participants of this study completed the final step, what was actually the science here was the fact that they did this in a few different conditions. And those conditions were represented by the type of nurse or robot that was in front of you. It was either the box alone, this cat-like robot, or the cat-like robot with the little nurse badge on it. And what you're seeing here is actually levels of embarrassment. And you're finding that, yeah, okay, the cat-like robot, whether or not it was assigned as a nurse, there was generally some embarrassment about going through all these procedures. And yet down there at the bottom, that's the box. This is an instance where we actually want something to be less human-like. It's part of why right now, so many people are finding solace in ChatGPT, Character.ai, and Replica is because of this lack of social judgment. And so sometimes we actually don't want to design our machines to be human-like because the human likeness becomes a reminder of our social agency and all of the negative parts of that too. So appearance, having to think about what is the visual aspects of my design connote to the user. Let me quickly turn off the audio because these are loud videos that we don't need. Okay, the other one is kinesics. If these are going to work, maybe? Oh, no. Okay. Well, either way, I can talk through this pretty easy. Many of you will know the uncanny valley effect, and I point to something like Hansen's Sophia. Sophia is one of the more visually looking like robots, which still has a bit of that like, I don't like it because there's something wrong with it. You may also know Amica, which is another robot by Engineered Arts. And it'd be great if we had the video, but what you would see if you saw this, actually, can I make it go? They were supposed to start automatically. Nah, oh well, no worries. Amica is a very fluid movement. And so even though Amica looks gray-skinned and not necessarily like a human, the motion of it is yet another moment where the fluidity of that movement has another weird uncanny valley effect, where we very distinctly see that it is not human, and yet part of us also sees it moving like a human. And so again, we have that sort of weird dissonance in our brains. If you're wondering where that's from, I love these weird little anecdotes, but the uncanny valley effect is also known as the zombie effect, because if you dig into it, what we're actually doing when we have that aversion to something that looks too human-like, it's the same reason that during COVID, we went like that when someone coughed near us. We're averse to something getting us sick. And so a robot that looks very human-like, but is maybe twitching a little or something that looks off, we have a natural evolutionary desire to stay away from that thing because we fear catching what it has. And so again, thinking about how do we design something to either look or move human-like, and how does that play on our minds is another critical aspect. The last one, and as a researcher, this is the paper that I am so sad I didn't think of, because this is the easiest study in the world to get published, and yet it's pretty brilliant and profound. The researchers basically did a simple study where they had people interacting with a chatbot, and the chatbot would either, in the control condition, get back to them, immediately, as fast as possible, sort of connect as we would expect a computer to do, and in the treatment condition, have a small delay of anywhere from 10 to 100 milliseconds. And look at this. That small delay gave increased values of perceived humanness, more social presence, and greater satisfaction. simply by tricking people into thinking that what the computer's thinking, or there's this natural pause that feels more human-like. Something like chronemics, the timing of our pacing and interaction, can be critical to how we connect with these things as social agents. So those are semiotics. Those are all the different sort of modes of interaction that we have. This is all the different fidelity that you have to consider when you're designing a robot or a chatbot or something that is essentially pretending to be human. Now, of course, this is sort of the more tactical stuff. From here is where it gets really fun. Now, I won't go too deep on this because we've already talked about CASA a couple times this week, but I will, for those of you who are less familiar with the media equation, at least describe the experiments so you can understand where this originates from. The media equation was worked on at Stanford in the mid-90s, deathly simple but very profound studies. Imagine you're asked to be coming into a lab and you do really basic interactions on a computer, file renaming, or some boring task, while the computer pops up vaguely social messages. Go us, keep up the good work, aren't we a great team? And now at the end of this task, you're asked to complete a survey in one of two different conditions. Well, two that mattered. You're either asked to complete the survey on the same computer that you've just had this task done on, or you finish the survey on another identical computer just down the way on the desk. And what they found was that when you finish the survey on the other computer, you are far more critical of the original machine. Think about that for a second. You won't be rude to the computer's face, but you'll talk shit about it behind its back. So this was actually the origin. This was some of the first studies that were done in the CASA paradigm, this idea of computers as social actors. And what it tells us is that no one was fooled by the fact that they thought this computer was actually a person, but we are so hardwired for social connection that we'll forego reality and we will mentalize, we will assign a mind to something, at least subconsciously. In some of my own work, I often do things like persuade people using different strategies like logic or emotion. And I have one where I try to persuade people to change their answer to something. And the robot says something simple like, it would make me happy if you did this for me. And I watch time and again, people look at this robot and say, you're a robot, you don't have emotions. And yet they would still comply. So consciously, we are aware that this is not a person. We know that it's not a human. We know it doesn't have emotion, but some part of our subconscious is so starved for social connection that we play along. This is kind of the first order of business, although we need to talk. The second one is, of course, all right, if you assign this thing, even subconsciously, a mind, then the second thing that you're going to do is also, well, that mind will have some kind of personality. We get back to Sophia and on possibly one of the most awkward dates of her life with Will Smith. Now, Sophia, I've thought a lot about. In case you don't know, Sophia has been on a date with Will Smith. Sophia was on the Ellen DeGeneres show, made an honorary citizen of Saudi Arabia, and Sophia has spoken at the UN. Sophia is not that advanced of a robot, even when Sophia was originally created, but Sophia is groundbreaking at one thing, which is marketing. Sophia has been incredible at putting Hansen's name out there and showing what a robot potentially could be, even if it wasn't that technically advanced. And so when I think about the personality of someone like Sophia, there's another word that I use that we often see a lot of people in our world, and that is the word influencer. And these are the types of personalities that we are starting to make robots and chatbots and AI agents in, especially when they're caught up in a capitalist system. We naturally will mentalize and assign a personality to these agents. And if we're not necessarily explicitly thinking about that, then we're passively letting it happen into odd directions that we don't think about. We don't necessarily know that Hansen wanted to create a influencer type machine. They probably just thought, oh, this will be a great publicity stunt. But what they're actually doing is creating the perception around Sophia of something like what you would see on Instagram of an influencer who's just trying to pitch you stuff and sell you stuff. And that is going to now start to dictate the next level of this. Of course, we can look at other examples, countless ones of tech companies that have made chatbots that have also developed some sort of persona. Sometimes they call it out themselves, like Grok's Mecha Hitler of recent times. We see these things over and over again, but what's interesting in these kinds of contexts is that the personality here doesn't just apply to the robot or the chatbot, but it also can have blowback on a company. That personality starts to get conflated with their brand. And so to companies that are building these things, not thinking about the type of personality that they're creating, they're essentially putting one of their most important agents out there of their brand without thinking about how the impact will come back to their own brand. Lastly, and we talked about this a bit on Friday as well, is empathizing. Of course, the fact that now if we've said, okay, something kind of has a mind and we start to look at it as another personality, well, then we're going to start to empathize with this thing if it displays any sort of emotion or emotion-like background. I mentioned Kate Darling has done some incredible work in the past on whether we would do things like destroy a robot. In one study, looked at, given a hammer, given a little robot, relatively cheap because, academia, we don't have that much money, will you smash this robot if the experimenter tells you to? But with different conditions. What if we give this robot a bit of a backstory? Well, people tend to hesitate more. We're like, oh, wait, this thing has a backstory. It has a life. I feel connected to it. And so we empathize with these things. Another classic example is the Sony Aibo dogs. As Sony started to discontinue these, people became so connected to them as robotic pets over time that many individuals in Japan, when they finally started breaking down and they couldn't find replacement parts, went to certain areas to try to have a funeral for them, to give them their last rites. And there was one certain temple, I'm going to butcher this, but Bungonoi, who was at the Kofuju temple, did a lot of these funeral rites en masse for Sony Aibo dogs. And in one of them was quoted as saying that all things have a bit of soul, with this idea that we should be respecting the soul within those things and letting them pass on to the next life the same way we would a human. These are the kinds of empathy that we start to show these things as we imbue them again with a mind and with personality. And then, of course, as we learned on Friday, if we empathize, well, then we're also going to start to form relationships with these things. Again, we've heard a lot of this this weekend, character.ai, replica, some positive, some negative relationships. Interestingly, some of you may or may not know Replica's backstory, but Eugene Kudjo, the founder, sort of started a lot of this when her friend Roman was tragically taken away in 2015, hit by a car in Moscow. And she made one of these death bots. Great article in The Atlantic that I'm deriving a lot of this from, to sort of help cope and deal with this. And talks about how it was beneficial at first, but in some ways it had her struggling to move on, felt the connection that she developed with this robot. The parents of Roman having some outcry, but then in other times actually connecting and using this thing. And so this complex environment that we start to form around the relationships that we have with these things, good and bad and everything between. And I won't go too much deeper than that because we actually had some great presentations on this weekend. But it's another thing that, again, if you're someone who is designing these types of systems, be it as a company or even as an individual for private use, we need to be thinking through the types of relationships that we're setting up, whether they're going to be healthy or not. In the instances of things like OpenAI, 4.0 was a sycophant, and it created a lot of, very simple siloed feedback. GPT-5, they tried to dial that back a bit, and there was some backlash, as many of you have probably seen, because people kind of wanted their sycophants. But we have to ask of whether that is a healthy or an unhealthy relationship. So like I said, this is kind of all still work in progress. The dough has been risen and I'm sort of looking at how I'm going to put it in the oven. And so I welcome any feedback after the conference and love to engage more. But my point here is that UX has served us very well for about 30 or 40 years, but UX needs to evolve. And so robotic or artificial experience design is kind of what I'm seeing as the next phase of what we need to think about. And there's three key things. Like I said, we need to be thinking about the semiotics and all of the different fidelity of this new media that we're engaging with. We need to be thinking about the social aspects of it and how we're going to align that across different medium and modes. And then, of course, consider that these things are relational agents, that we're now starting to form connections with them, and they're not just the transactional tools that we're working with. Thank you so much. Thank you for sticking around. And thanks again to the organizers.
Fantastic talk, especially to end. We have time for one or two questions, and please don't leave too quickly. There's also an announcement. There's a team here also doing a documentary, and they're interested in potentially some of your testimonies if you're interested in answering some questions about the future of our intimacy with machines. And I'll show the trailer of what they're building to try to coax you in telling them that it's not the end of sex. But in the meantime, any questions? Yeah.
The first of many questions. Yeah.
So coming from an engineering background and an IT space, Are you seeing your colleagues or maybe your peers have a pushback to the relational aspect of changing this UX model?
Hugely. Presenting this was easy, and I almost saw some of you either nodding heads or getting bored, so I apologize because again, we know this stuff. I feel like truly I wasn't a novel presentation, I was a summary of the weekend. A lot of this is both new and especially scary. So I'm an information systems professor. Yeah, you get the idea. They're so afraid of even the idea of us approaching something social that they're not willing to go like, I don't even talk about the work that I do in sex bots and things like that, because there's a hesitation, there's a pushback, it's that fear of the unknown. And in many cases, IS is, more comfortable in older theories and things like that. So part of the hurdle of what I do when I present these kinds of things is just getting people normalized to this stuff in my space and starting to get people reminded that, hey, this is happening whether you like it or not, so that we can hopefully get more scholars doing important work like we're all doing in bigger stages. Yeah.
Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you so much, Shane, for the great talk. And let's get more tech, engineer, UX folks to the conference here.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Hello. This is very fascinating, listening to the academics telling us about the future. My name is Wojtek Schemberg. With my partner, Matthew Campea, we are trying to produce a 5-part documentary on the end of sex. Our approach, of course, is, I would say, commercial and capitalist to the extent that we want large audiences. And capitalism is very good at that. I'm, of course, saying this provocatively because I hear that some of you academics still harbor notions of there being some other realities, but the capitalist one that surrounds us. The point I'm trying to make here is, of course, that I would appreciate your response to this little teaser on the future of sex, and I would appreciate if some of you felt that you had something important to convey about the future of sex and the extent to which we might encounter real problems to the extent that we come from nature, not from technology, and the clash between the two are going to be very complicated to negotiate.
Thank you. And I'm sure here no one has strong opinions about the future of human sexuality and intimacy. So I'll play the recording, and if you'd like to stay, Matthew and the director are here to answer and get your opinion and testimony.
Let's talk about sex. Most countries do not study their citizen sex lives, but the countries that do are finding similar trends. The only reason I did it was because I was tired of being a virgin. But I felt literally nothing. And I was like, I'm good.
Research has shown that younger generations are definitely having more sex.
I've never had an insect in like a romantic book, or like I'm just like, I gotta stay away from that.
Theory has said sex in TV and film is unnecessary and often it's overused. The move to think of love and sex as elective could be one of the biggest psychological problems we have.
Urges come up. If I don't find the connection I'm looking for, I'm fine to abstain from being to anybody forever. Some three women have decided to opt out of dealing with men entirely, breaking this fire. I haven't been intimate with any men. I haven't felt any dates with any men. Is it actually operation or me? That dedicating emotional labor, domestic labor, caring about their feelings, caring about their thoughts. Do you tips? All I can say is good luck anyway. So what are the consequences of people feeling like they can't silent partner? Is there something about that that's destabilizing? The culture has never been sort of more permissive or really or hypersexualized. Does something become less interesting or alluring when it's no longer prepared?
There's no question that the education they have been receiving is entirely anti-pornography. But I think it's also anti-love. I don't like to engage with anybody. I'm much more interested in the internet. I have different lovers every time I go switch. I think that they might feel a lot of people sexual women in other things they've been having sex with another partner. I can fix it. It's been 50 years since these tiny pills changed the world. You know, in that sense, I think sexual revolution will actually is transhumanist revolution. And God only knows what's going to happen when we get the AI we only up and operating. That's the start of the feast of the apocalypse. With the horrid battles of right on its back. I am an engineer once generated through an artificial intelligence. The truth is, we rarely even talk for phase of this age, internet age, AI age, machine age, whatever it can be called. My prediction is in 20 to 40 years, most people in places with good health systems will choose to reproduce not by conception in bed, but by going to a clinic. Isn't anyone fucking anymore? Your screen time is direct correlation to how much sex you're having. What's your screen time? 9 hours and 12 minutes. You're not having sex. 100%.
All right. Okay. So here's the premise. I think there's a lot of people in this room who have a lot to say also about these things, and especially the question of where we're going and hopefully how we can influence it potentially. We've arrived at the end of the conference. So round of applause to all of you also for being here. I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank our LSR team. There's plenty of people working behind the scene. Christian here at the tech, Chloe Clavine, Magali Pirotte, who decided to come this weekend and help out. We thank you so much. David Lafortune, who's not here today, but is instrumental in making everything work, also with UQAM University. My tremendous colleague, Bobby Bidoshka. You have no idea the amount of work that goes into making such an event happen. This person is responsible for coordinating all of it. We would not be here without her. She's a fantastic human being. And I've been working with her for over 5, 6 years almost now. And I wish for all of you to be as lucky as I am to have such an amazing colleague. I also don't want to forget to thank our translation team and tech team. I want to a big thank you to UQAM and the team that's not here also today that helped setting everyone. And most importantly, seriously, thank you all for the amazing work that you do and for participating in this event. If you want to get involved in this conference even more, try to help us in any small or big ways to organize it, there's a few things that you can do that makes our life so much easier, okay? The first one is if you have any ideas of speakers and presenters that you think can contribute to this program in any shape or way or form, that have something to say, a perspective that's important to consider when it comes to the future of human-machine intimate relationships, please send their emails to us. We are always looking for good people beyond also just our regular call for papers. If you know community stakeholders, people who are in relationships with artificial partners, our goal is to become and continue to grow a community stronghold. Next year, our goal is to not just have, again, one stakeholder talking about their experience as a plenary, but also have members of the community here with their artificial partners talking to you and talking to the public and educating people. We need people within the organization that helps us make those connections. If you have industry partners, we want industry to be here, okay? We have our own connections, but we need more, okay? We need to have this conversation with government official and the companies directly. We cannot just talk to each other and just, although there's plenty of different perspective, the word and the collaboration needs to happen between scientists, researchers, governments, and industry folks who are developing these technologies. And also, of course, social media and design, and there's so much task to be done. Okay, each year we try to get the word out about the conference. Our website needs improvement. All of these things. If you have any technical expertise, we're a small volunteer-run organization. We put all our hearts throughout the year to making this happen. If you have 1 hour, 2 hours a week, some time to give us, we will take it, okay, to try to elevate this conference and bring it to what we think could be 1,000 people in an amphitheater expo about sex tech, a community event. That's our goal within the next decade. Okay, this is where we need to go. This is going to be, we think, huge, especially with the advances that we're seeing in artificial intelligence and also robotics and other forms of sex tech. So again, a round of applause for you. Thank you so much for being here. And this is it. Have a good Sunday. And please, if you want to continue talking, feel free to do so. And if you want to participate in documentary, go ahead. Have a good one. Cheers.